I'm Jennifer Gilmour and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I want to get to the answers to the questions that many have from those that work in the domestic abuse sector, getting an inside feel of what it's really like in their job role and sharing it with all of you. Hi everyone, welcome to #Abuse Talk. I'm delighted to have Claire Verney with us today, and we're going to be discussing perpetrator programs. It's something I'm quite excited about because we haven't actually discussed this aspect before, and Claire has worked in a family court team for a domestic violence charity for many years, and one of her main jobs was to review CAFCASS referrals for the Perpetrator programme. So before we start though, I have to say a big thank you to the main sponsor, which is Rockpool, and they deliver trauma-informed programmes. They actually have a new tier out for their ABC of trauma, so you can actually become a trauma-informed educator now, so do check them out at rockpool.life. And I also want to say, I haven't done this on the YouTube channel, but I want to say a big thank you to my patrons on the #abuse tier on my Patreon account, and that's Kat Hay and Susan Rahima. You can check that out at patreon.com/Jen L. Gilmour if you want to support the efforts. And there's going to be voting powers in the near future, and you also find out about the upcoming themes and news before everyone else. But let's get into it because I'm really excited to talk with Claire about the Perpetrator programs and also what Claire's doing now. So Claire, can you just first of all just give a bit of an introduction to you and what you do?
Hi. Well, I live in Nottingham. I have a 5-year-old son, so that takes up a lot of my time. But I run a team of domestic abuse experts who provide assessments, consultancy and training to social workers and to the family courts. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
No, that's great, thank you. We're going to try and unpick everything, and we've got questions that have been brought in by other people as well. But for me, I would like to know about the Perpetrator programs and your referral with that. So can you tell us just a bit about Perpetrator programs in general?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to remember about Perpetrator programs is what they're not. So they're not anger management, they're not therapy, they're not parenting programs. They're specifically behavioural change programs to change the behaviours of perpetrators. And that's a really important thing to remember, because often people will get sidetracked and think that what they're doing is a perpetrator program when it's not. It's really important to make sure that it is a domestic abuse perpetrator program or domestic violence perpetrator program that you're doing. There are some different ones around, but the ones that the courts should refer to and the ones that are used most in the UK are programs that are accredited by a charity called Respect. They're online, so you can look them up. They've got a helpline, and they regulate all the programs in the UK, and they have set standards that all programs should follow. So if you're looking for a perpetrator program, you can call them. They've got a helpline. And also, if your partner's on a program and you want to know more, you can call them as well. They also do work with male victims, so they're quite a good charity to find out more about perpetrator programs. There's not that many around, which is a problem, which is why people often, if they can't get onto a perpetrator program, will end up doing something like anger management instead.
Right.
So, but recently there has been a lot of noise in the media about doing more perpetrator work. And people want that included in the new domestic abuse bill. So I guess we'll have to see if that happens.
Yes, no, thank you. So do you have any knowledge of the success rate for the perpetrator programs, and probably more specifically the one that you're talking about?
Yeah. So what I was told when I first started working there, so back in 2011, is that generally a third of the people who complete will stop using abuse and violence altogether.
Mm-hmm.
A third will stop using the worst violence, and then a third there'd be no change at all. There has been some recent reports. So there's the Drive project. The results of their evaluation came out quite recently, and that's been in the news. What they found is that the police noticed a 30% reduction in offending.
Right.
So I suppose it's kind of the same, about a third of the people who are going through. And there was a big report, the Mirabelle report, which took years and years for them to do, and that was a big study on perpetrators and victims in programs. And from what I can see, that's kind of the success rate. But also, programs take about 6 months.
Right.
So it's 26 sessions you attend once a week. So not everyone finishes. I was trying to look up the statistics for that, and I think I saw about 35% of people who are referred to a program actually finish. And the thing is that people would say, well, it's too long, it should be shorter, and then more men would finish it. But this is, work. It's not a quick fix at all, because a lot of time you're looking at sort of an entrenched behaviour and the reasons for that behaviour. Power and control, that's what it's based on. So it takes a long time to change those behaviours and views that someone could have had for their entire life. So 6 months, that's how it that's how it is.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, like what you've just said, is that it is based on somebody referring them to it. It's not their choice to go on to it. Is that right?
No, you can refer yourself. So the main routes of referral are either from social services, CAFCASS, or self-referrals. There are a few pilot projects around where police could refer or doctors could refer. I never really worked with that, but I know that there has been some pilot programs that have taken referrals from elsewhere. The CAFCASS referrals, which is what I dealt with most, was usually when the dad is taking mum to court to have contact with the children. She says there's domestic abuse. CAFCASS would do a report and they can recommend the programme, possibly, and then the court would need to order it. Then you'd be referred to a programme. If you do it that way, then the programme is free. It's paid for by Department of Education. It was paid for, or by a contract with CAFCASS, with the programme provider.
Right.
So yeah, but you can refer yourself. It's not a case of just because you want to do the programme you'll get on it.
Yeah.
Because it's a behavioural change programme, you must have behaviour that needs to change. Otherwise it's not going to change.
Yeah.
So as much as you could refer yourself, you want to do it, you're willing to pay, or if the court said you've got to do it, if you don't admit, I have done these things and I need to change, you're not going to get on a programme, or not a reputable one anyway. There's got to be some behaviour that they can work with and can change.
Yeah. No, that's great. So how about after a perpetrator program, so you say around 6 months, and somebody's completed that program, is there some kind of probation period? So I'm kind of thinking, like, are they still in touch with maybe the program leaders? Do they not like keep an eye on them, but make sure that they're still on course? If that makes sense.
There was kind of a voluntary follow-on program that people could go on, but it was so poorly attended that it didn't. It just stopped happening. There isn't, I'm afraid, any way for the perpetrator really. Although I would have thought if they felt their need and they wanted to speak to the facilitator, I'm sure that could probably happen. But the main thing is that respect accredited programs have to have an integrated partner support program working alongside it, and they offer support to a woman for a year,
right?
Usually. So the support for the victim does carry on way after the program, and I would say that's probably especially important for people that are still together. If their partner attends the program. So, it's voluntary for the victim if they want to do that, but that support is there for longer than the program went.
No, that's great, thank you. So we've had a few questions in, so hopefully you'll be able to bring some clarity, and I'll read them as they've been written. I feel there needs to be more varied programs. I went on the separated parents one, as did my mother, who was my abuser and was seeking contact. It wasn't appropriate at all and was a pointless exercise. What alternatives could or should we have been offered in a parent-child situation? So I know it's not completely linked, but I guess it's flagged up something for that individual about, programs in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem again, is that, this was probably what they call an SPIP. Or a PIP, which is a parenting information program, or separated parent programs they can be, and that it is just what it calls itself, an information program. And that's kind of one of the problems that we have with perpetrator programs, is that there's not very many about. Also, they tend to be just for male perpetrators, although I have seen female perpetrators be worked on, but that's usually on a one-to-one basis. And probably I would have said there would have been nothing out there that would have been suitable for a mother to attend a program. And some of that, I suppose, is about money, then, because there were quite a few things that the charity that I worked with would have liked to have done, have other programs that were for other areas for female perpetrators. We really wanted to set up another program that would have been for LGB perpetrators and victims, but we just couldn't get the money. I think couldn't get the money out, or the people to go on it. A lot of the programs, they're funded by CAFCASS, which when I worked with them would only fund male perpetrator programs, or there's local authorities that fund it, and to a certain extent they kind of set the rules. So unfortunately that was probably all they could offer in that situation.
I mean, it seems like with any kind of programs, it depends on the local authority or the local charity or organisation that are able to connect with the local services in the area to be able to provide it, which I find quite frustrating, especially when, I don't know, you want to recommend certain programs to people, or you think it might be beneficial, but then you find out it's not in their area, and sometimes it's like that would make a difference to that person, but it's just not accessible. Although I don't think an online version is suitable either. I don't think there is anything for perpetrator programs on the online side of things. Is there?
I mean, possibly it might be possible to do something to do with Skype, I wonder, but what they found is that group work programs is what works best, because then the perpetrators are held to account by the people around them. They do things like role plays and things like that only work in a group. And I mean, that's what they found is the most effective. I mean, you can do one-to-one work. That's what we had to do with people who needed a translator, or when we did do female perpetrator work, it was on a one-to-one. But it's seen as not as effective as group work programs. And for you to run a group work program, you need at least, I guess we used to say 15 perpetrators on that program. It is quite difficult to maybe get 15 female perpetrators in that one area, or 15 abusive adults. Or we did have a program that was for young people, and we also had a program that was for Muslims. So sometimes you can get a few different programs, but the provision's not out there for everyone, unfortunately. And the thing is, when you're looking at risk and risk of domestic violence, the only proven way that there is to reduce someone's risk is by a perpetrator program. So yeah, it's very frustrating. I was the person who would pick up the phones basically where I used to work, and I would get people on the phone who really needed the perpetrator program. They needed the help, and it's very frustrating to just say that there's nothing you can provide, and it leaves people stuck. With nowhere to go. So sometimes that is when you get people go into programs that are not quite right. And I guess what's important is if you're in court proceedings and your partner is referred to a program that's not suitable, you then don't want the court to be thinking, well, they've done a program, so now it's all right to have contact. And that's the major problem with the perpetrator programs within family courts, is that judges will often see a completion of a perpetrator program as, oh, it's all right now. I mean, programs should always give final reports that should be given to CAFCASS and going to court. But the danger is it's just perceived as a tick box exercise that, okay, they've done a program and that's it, they're fine, they can now have whatever contact they want.
I mean,
does it work?
It's a real difficult one, isn't it? Because I completely see how the courts would do that, and I guess maybe it's also the fact that the courts need training on that front themselves, not be dependent on a report or the completion of a program. Because I think also when something's new, like, I don't know, I've been on courses before, for example, I'm on Slimming World right now, so and it's a really bad comparison, but I know because I'm going every single week that I'm going to be a good girl or attempt to be a good girl, but I know that as soon as I finish that, then it kind of will run away with itself as I put on weight again. So it's also like, in a way, that I have to change my behaviour with that side, and I'm trying to relate to it as much as possible here. But it's so easy to just fall back into the old habits or the ways that you actually know what you think is the correct way of life, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense. Really bad comparison there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but the Drive project report that came out recently, where the police showed a 30% reduction in offending, that carried on for a year after the program. They'd completed the program. So, but that kind of change takes a lot of work, and a lot of challenging. It's, you're not, It's not a group of perpetrators sitting around a table going, "Oh, I've done this," or "Oh, you know, it's terrible what's happened." That's not what it is at all. It's hard work. They have homework. They have homework. They have. It's very challenging. And another thing, where I used to work in DVIP, they felt very strongly that there should be a woman's voice in the room.
Right.
So one of the facilitators would always be a woman, so that, you know, it's a way of getting the women's voices heard within that group. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree with you actually, and especially like learning to, I don't know, it could be a respect thing as well, couldn't it? And we just don't know the backgrounds of people. Got another question.
Yes, okay.
How did the referral process happen for perpetrator programs, and were victims listened to as part of this?
Okay, well, I mean, so referral, you could self-refer, which would mean you'd kind of call up, have a discussion over the phone, then you'd go in for a suitability assessment. And then, or if you're in family courts, then CAFCASS would do a report, and if the judge agreed with the CAFCASS report and made an order, you'd then be referred, or a local authority would refer you. So all of those routes, the perpetrator would have to have a suitability assessment.
Right.
So the things they'd be looking at is, well, their willingness to attend for 6 months, once a week. And also, again, that thing where they have to be admitting some behaviour to be going on the programme. Another thing is that before he can start on the programme, he had to give us details of all his partners and ex-partners. Right. And the integrated support would then proactively call all of the partners or ex-partners. And that's something that I used to volunteer and help with. So it would mean, we'd phone them up and we'd say, your partner or ex-partner that you haven't seen for 5 years or whatever is starting a program. We'd just tell them a bit about the program, and then we'd offer them support, and they can choose whether they want to have that support or not. It's totally voluntary on their part. Usually it would mean telephone support. So we'd call them up. We'd say, well, how often do you want us to call? We'll call you every week, or we'll call you every month. And it would be just a part of it is sort of checking in to see that, no further abuse is, what's happening at home. And or some of it could be if he discloses something in the session. So they would have to perpetrators would have to do like a check-in at the beginning of the session where they should talk about any recent abuse. Right. So if they disclose something, we would then go back to the partner or ex-partner to talk about that and see if, they need any support. Women were offered the chance of going into a group, but kind of quite, not, I think it was about less than a quarter wanted to do that. It was about 20% that wanted to do a group, or some people would come in and do face-to-face. But that's another thing about the Respect accredited programs, is that part of that accreditation means that they must have that integrated support. And the facilitators of the Perpetrator program would have meetings with the women support service to make sure that, the victims being listened to, and if they disclose any abuse, that's brought up with the perpetrator in the program. It should be like an integrated response. And if your partner or ex-partner is on a program, you should be hearing from the program. And if you don't, then I would say give them a ring and find out what's going on. Or it's perhaps not an accredited program, but it's another thing is that you know, don't feel like you have to engage with that if you don't want to, and just do as much or as little as you want. If you just want to talk to someone on the phone once a month, then that's fine. It's not compulsory or anything like that, and they're there to support victims or past victims, and they can do things like signpost you to other services if you need it. If, you know, things really get out of hand, you know, they can help you with injunctions or anything like that. And it's a really important part of accredited programs that, you know, victims have the support and that perpetrators are held to account for their behaviour, and it's the victims that are most able to tell you about that, and also most able to tell you whether the abuse has stopped, as it should do.
I suppose it's a good way of finding out and offering that support, then just sort of, it gives you that way, really, that contact. I mean, I don't know how I would feel if, you know, you maybe even 10 years down the line you get a phone call saying your ex-partner. I could not even comprehend what you would feel in that moment, whether, you know, so I think it is definitely there, that support is needed. I've got another question. Did perpetrators get flagged up if they were repeatedly taking someone back to court? So did perpetrators get flagged up if they were repeatedly taking someone back to court? Is the impacts on the victim emotionally and financially taken into consideration? So I mean, that's probably more about your family court side. So you know, what do you think to that?
I mean, absolutely they should be. And certainly where I worked in DVIP, well, you know, we would be very concerned about that. DVIP, I worked in the family court team, which, so we were involved more in the risk assessments that are used in court, or risk assessments that are used by social services. And we'd be more involved in a case that was in court. And, you know, people use the court system to continue their abuse, and they should absolutely be talked to about that on the programme. And, you know, also if they're not paying child maintenance, that should be brought up in the programme. That is a form of continuing financial abuse if they're not paying child maintenance, and that's absolutely something that should be addressed on a programme. And the main thing, I think, that should always come first, really, is the child in this. When you're in family court proceedings, you've got a child there, and everything you do should have that in mind, that, you know, that a child, you know, and the mother, and to a certain extent the child is being dragged into court, and it can be years and years in court, and that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the victim, it's not good for the child. So absolutely, that is something that should be taken into consideration. And I did know of cases where, when a perpetrator was in family court and they'd finished the programme, they then dropped their cases. Because I wouldn't hold up a lot of hope, but it has happened. And the things that they should be learning about on the programme, about respect, about parenting, because the programme will cover parenting. It covers, you know, respectful attitudes and how you treat women. And so continuing abuse, whether it's emotionally, financially, through the court process, should absolutely be flagged up. And if you are contacted by the Women's Support Service, an integrated support service, then that's something that you need to make them aware of, so that it can be brought up in the programme. And that's why it is good, as much as it would be very weird to be phoned up 5 years after you split up from someone. I think you know, maybe you'd need a couple of weeks to get your head around that. But that's why it's a good thing to, you know, even just engage with a little bit and say, you know, he's still not paying maintenance, or he's taking me back to court for like the third time or fifth time, and now he's doing a program. And also, if he's ordered to do the program, that means you're going to have at least a 6 months delay on your case in court. In fact, it's going to be more than that, because usually there's a waiting list and then there's a report to be done afterwards. And I totally understand how, you know, why mums don't want that. But it's better that they're on an accredited program that has a chance of actually doing something than being on an anger management program that lasts a couple of days. They get a certificate and the court thinks that everything's then all right. And, you know, it's better to do it.
Yeah, I think maybe even, you know, just thinking about it, I mean, I've spoken to so many people that have told me the price that they have paid, but because of that continuous of going into court. And I thought, you know, I was bad and I spent about £10,000, but there's people out there have spent over £50,000, and it's completely shocking. And it's like, at what point, you know, do perpetrators take that on and realise what their actions are? And actually, if you think about it, that's not the best interest of the children, because it's taken all that financial even security or, you know, resources for them away. And it's not a case of fighting for, you know, the residency or anything like that, but it's looking at the bigger picture. Once you've agreed on some contact, unless there's a significant issue between birth, then it needs to go back to court. I agree, but, you know, they just continuously just take you back no matter what. It's really difficult. And, you know, at what point is someone going to say, actually, you know, you should pay that money back for putting that person through that? I feel like I should have compensation, and I'm pretty much sure a lot of other people should do. I mean, well.
the court can make an order, and I have seen it. The court can make an order that you're not allowed to take the case back to court again. It's like that is the end of it. And I would say, if someone's referred to a perpetrator program, they either don't finish it, don't attend, or don't show any changes, then that is the point at which you should say that's enough. Because a perpetrator program is the only way to change someone's abusive behaviour. So if that's not going to happen, then that's, you know, no more orders, no more contact. So that's very controversial, I know, but just my opinion. You know, it's about the child's rights, and the child should have a right not to be forced to see an abusive parent. So I would say, I reckon perpetrator program, if they can't get on a perpetrator program because they're not admitting the abuse, or they don't finish it, or they don't make the changes, there's the only other thing you could possibly do is have a risk assessment. And that's a whole other thing that I could talk for much longer about. But yeah, so if you're in court proceedings, perpetrator program is probably going to be one of the last things you should do before the court should be putting a stop to it.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? So let's get into some more finer detail, really. So, do you know how much the perpetrator programs cost, you know, to run, and who the provider is of it? Is it like a training, you know, like people get trained to run the program?
All right. Well, so there are minimum standards. So there's the respect standards that they have, and there should be, you know, a woman's voice in the room, a facilitator. The facilitator should definitely be highly trained. It's not an easy job. I really didn't want to do it. I have to say, I was much happier to be on the phone or to be sat with the paperwork. I really didn't want to be in the room with 15 versions of my ex-husband. So yeah, they're definitely changed. Usually their backgrounds are from either sort of probation, mental health. Those kind of backgrounds were usually people who are facilitators. I did meet someone who was a trainer, and that was kind of their job, and they were asked by a council to run a program, and he gave up after 2 sessions because it's not the same as teaching. It's really not. It's holding someone accountable for their behaviour, and that's even different from therapy, really. So they should, they need to have skills, I would say. When someone's referred through CAFCASS or through the local authorities, usually, so they pay for it. So if you're in court proceedings, then you don't pay for the Perpetrator program. And each Perpetrator program charges what they like, really. There's no sort of set rate. Respect doesn't set any rate. Where I used to work, they had kind of a sliding scale depending on what you could afford. But I think part of having, that respect and that want to change, paying for it, I suppose people could have argued it could be part of that way that you show respect and show your willingness to change, in that you're willing to pay for it. On the other hand, there are quite a few people, when I spoke to on the phone, they would pay any money, let me on your program. I haven't done anything wrong. She's lying. I didn't do anything, but I'll pay you anything so I can do the program. And that's kind of, a program shouldn't do that, really. It's about changing their behaviour and everything. I think when I sort of the period of time when I worked within like Perpetrator program charities, I knew of 2 that went under in say maybe 5 years, one in Essex, and yeah, it's hit by that same funding problem that all domestic violence charities, I guess, are having. But I guess the good news is now that more people are starting to see that Perpetrator programs are a valid way to go. When I started working there in 2011, some people were actually quite angry that we were doing it, because they saw it as taking money away from women. So taking money away from refugees and putting it into perpetrators instead. I can see why people would say that, but I think people now are seeing that, perpetrators should be held accountable for what they did. So that's part of it. And also, programs have shown that, they're more effective than just working with victims, because perpetrators are going to go on and have how many relationships? 5, 6 relationships. They're abusive in everyone. And working with one victim is not going to stop him going on and having however many other partners and being abusive to them. So it's a valid thing.
Sorry, I was just thinking on your sort of line of thought there as well, is if we change our thought process on it as well, that actually the Perpetrator program's there putting money into the perpetrators, but it's not just that, is it? Because you're supporting the women who have experienced that abuse from that perpetrator. So it's actually beneficial to both the victim and the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you said there.
Don't they?
I agree with what you said about, that perpetrator is going to go on to have those multiple relationships and just leave a trail, really, of things that is not changed in that behaviour, whereas obviously that programme is going to be the thing that changes that behaviour. So it's quite interesting, really, to sort of dissect it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realise that programs have that integrated support within them,
Yeah.
and that's really important. I think any program that you hear about, it should have that support within it. It's a way of keeping the perpetrator accountable. It's a way of keeping the victim safe. I think that's a really important part of it, and I think a lot of people don't realise that that's what they do.
I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about what would be there for the victim, or even that you would go to that extent of bringing ex-partners up as well. And to be honest, I think I suppose it'd be nice to know that, because they've taken that step or whatever it might be. So do you think it's a good use of money then, since we're talking about putting money into perpetrators sort of thing, do you think it's a good use of money considering the success rate then? Do you think it's worth it?
I think it's the only thing that we have that can reduce the risk of a perpetrator. So in that case, if there's a chance that it can work for even a third, then it's worth it. I think it is kind of scandalous what's happened about refugees. Absolutely, money shouldn't be taken away from that. But this is a way to stop repeat victims, and it's the best we have. So
going on to you as a person, because you've supported domestic abuse victims then, so thinking about the victims through the family court system, what have you learned from all of that, from the perpetrator programs to then supporting the victim? You've got completely done one side and then the other.
I mean, from what I saw, what I dealt with a lot more than the actual people was the paperwork, or the people on the phone I did deal with as well. And from what I can see is, it's incredibly stressful. It's very stressful for the victims. It's full of, ridiculous situations, ridiculous views from judges, from CAFCASS, from perpetrators. And the thing is that I would see stuff every single day. I'd see judges say he only put his hand around her neck, he didn't strangle her. That was one of my all-time bugbears that I would see every day. Strangulation, and this thing about, oh well, maybe he might have asked her to have sex when she didn't want to, or had sex when she didn't want to. Actually, that's rape. We're not discussing that. It's historical. Well, everything's historical, and I hope there is a way out of the mess, but I don't know what it is. And there's been stuff in the paper recently about a judge saying, well, because the mum didn't fight back, it wasn't rape. I was not surprised to hear it at all. I've heard that several times. All I could do in the situation, I guess, was flag it up to my manager, who would try and flag it up with someone. But it's really hard. And, for victims who are going through that, sometimes I'm at a loss for words for what to say to them, really, because it's awful, and there's no way around it. All you can hope is that they can get some good support from somewhere, either from charities or get a solicitor, get a Mackenzie friend, anything you can do that will help you through that time. And I'm a big believer that what we shouldn't be talking about is father's rights or anyone's rights other than the child. And that that really should come first for everyone.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I don't know if you've I've been following the Emily Hunt case. I don't know if you've been following that, and the fact that really it's about proving that you didn't give consent, which is like, well, why don't we look at proving that consent was given? You know, it's the same thing. We're flipping it around, and we're just finding excuses for that type of behaviour. Well, let's move on to what you do now, because we've spoken a bit about what you did some time ago now. So what's your work, and what do you do now with your time then? Obviously you still work in, you know, the domestic abuse sector. So what's your job role now?
Well, me and two of my colleagues, we set up our own company. And I run a team of domestic abuse experts, which a lot of people may not know exist, but they are out there. And the main work I would say that we do is that we do assessments that are used by social services or by courts, the family court. Our clients are generally social workers or solicitors. And what an assessor will do is interview the perpetrator, interview the victim, and do a risk assessment. So they're looking at how risky he is, what the risk is to the victim, what the risk is to the children, and then like a risk management plan about how we can reduce the risk. And what I deal with now are the worst cases. If social services are involved and they're taking the parents to court to remove the children, that's the worst cases. And I just mostly I am dealing with social workers and solicitors now, so I don't have that input that I used to have with perpetrators and victims anymore, apart from to read all the paperwork, which, you know, I'm much happier to deal with paper, I have to say. But kind of on a personal level, I've got more into sort of looking at Twitter, which I never really used to do, because I tried to sort of tweet for the company, and it's opened up this area of learning from victims. I was in an abusive marriage for 15, more than that, I think. About 15 years, and I hadn't really touched on that for quite a long time. I haven't thought about it for a while, and you know, in what I know about the family court system and what I know are in CAFCASS reports, and I know what judges are saying, I really want to do more to help people who are going through family court. My kind of wish or something, I suppose, is that I could start a charity that would help domestic abuse victims who are going through court. I'm not sure whether I'll ever have the funds to do it or how, but that's what I'm looking at the moment. I've done Mackenzie Friend training, and I'm just looking around to see what can I do, because it's a terrible situation, and I have kind of a lot of knowledge. I probably used to read about 10 CAFCASS reports a week, so I know, you know, I know it really well. So we'll have to see.
Clearly a lot of valuable, you know, experience that you've gained over some kind of years, and not just the experience that you've got in the sector, but obviously that lived experience, which gives you that empathy and understanding, really. So thank you for that. So obviously you've mentioned this company, you haven't mentioned the name, so tell us the name of the company, and also how people would get in touch with you if they feel like they needed to after listening to this today.
So the company is called DVAct. So I'm not very good at marketing or PR, am I? I can't even say the name of my own company. So it stands for Domestic Violence Assessment, Consultancy and Training. We deliver services to social workers and solicitors, but I've recently put something out about how families need to be supported if there is a lockdown over the coronavirus.
Yes.
So I'm trying to get us out there a little bit more. I'm learning at that. If people want to get in touch with me, I'm so happy to talk to anyone. You can email me at info@dvact.org. You can look at our website, which is dvact.org, so it's quite easy. Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, I will put all the information anyway in the description, but it's good to hear it from you as well. So that leaves me to say thank you so much for giving your valuable time on talking about perpetrator programs and your experience, which is, very clearly valuable. And it's certainly given me a lot to think about, and maybe not overlook certain aspects of it as well, because you can get into that moment of just, sort of being in the victim mode of thinking that that's never going to work or that's never going to solve it. But, hearing about the outcomes and, the only thing really to help change behaviour, it is important. So thank you for sharing that with us all today.
Okay.
The next #Abuse Talk interview is actually going to be on the 6th of May. So I can't believe I'm saying that, because we're recording this at the beginning of March. So The next one is on the 6th of May, and you can join in on the YouTube channel. If you're not a subscriber of the YouTube channel, then click subscribe so that you can be notified of any new videos and any more of the #Abuse Talk interviews. And also head over to #Abuse Talk on Twitter now, where we're going to continue the discussion about perpetrator programs. That's my voice going. But we're going to continue the discussion, because it's actually something that we've never spoken about on the Twitter chat. And we definitely need to talk about what we've heard from Claire today, what we've learned, and also our opinions on it. And remembering that our platform is not to judge or anything. We've all got our own individual opinions. So let's get tweeting about that. And again, Claire, just a huge thank you. I hope you're going to join us over on Twitter, and definitely join in the company as well, and let us know all about you over there as well, because it would be really lovely to have you, especially if anybody has any extra burning questions. I'm sure you'll be able to answer them, won't you?
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Oh, did you want to say something? Sorry.
Oh, no, just I'm really happy to talk to anyone or email anyone. I work from home. I never get to speak to anyone anymore. So, yeah, I'm really happy for any questions.
So basically everyone's going to hound you and message you now, so that you don't feel isolated working from home. No, well, a big thank you. And for everybody, just remember that together we're louder, and we can make a difference by talking, by listening, and by discussing everything to do with domestic abuse. So thank you.